Ross, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Michael. I could not be more pleased and happy that you invited me.
Let's just start with a little bit about your background. You are a world expert specializing in adult romantic attachment and relationship. Your work, though, clearly integrates a lot of self-related theory in addition to general relationship theory. So it's not just focused on romantic attachment, though that is certainly the core of your expertise.
And one of the things that I absolutely love about our conversations, and the listeners should know that we've had a few before this, is that I get a chance to talk to an extremely educated, highly intelligent person who understands that my work is not pop psychology. And as much as I wrote it for the general public, it really is based and heavily influenced on clinical psychological theory. And to your question about, or in your comment about my work, it comes from as much as what I've studied, what I've learned, the experience of me being a psychotherapist over 30 years, and as much as my own recovery from my own trauma-based relationship problems that I was able to put together and package in a bunch of concepts and theories that I would ultimately call the human magnet syndrome. So I'm glad to talk about those and explain them.
I've got so many questions.
Well, shoot.
One of them is about the way in which an individual develops either self-love deficit or a narcissistic personality type. Would you say that there are recurring patterns? Is it that, like,
Absolutely,
if a person has self-love deficit, that there was some kind of relationship early on in development with a more narcissistic personality type? That there was some kind of relationship early on in development with a more narcissistic personality?
Absolutely. And in fact, it won't surprise any person who identifies themselves as an SLD. It will surprise someone who's a narcissist because they don't believe they are, and more than likely is not interested in my work. But they come from the same families. So the most simplistic explanation of the cause of self-love deficit disorder and pathological narcissism is attachment trauma. We already know that that sociopaths or people with ASPD, antisocial personality disorder, and even people with borderline personality disorder, they suffered a great amount of trauma in their formative years. They were unable to attach to a caregiver, which is usually, if not always, the result of one parent being a pathological narcissist. So the person with NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, BPD, borderline, ASPD, antisocial personality disorders, all have this common childhood experience of attachment, an attachment disorder, because one parent was a pathological narcissist. So we can talk more about that later if you want, but also the SLD, the codependent, also experienced attachment disorder, attachment trauma, as I should say. And they often come from the same parents. And the way to prove that is to ask anyone who's listening to us, if they identify themselves as a codependent or SLD, the probability is high, if you have a sibling or more, that your sibling is either an SLD or a narcissist. They come from the same family. And the difference between the two, the juncture in their formative years that differentiates the two, is how the child, the infant, is able to make sense of and modify itself to the narcissist. Now, I need to credit Alice Miller's work in The Drama of the Gifted Child, and I got this idea when I first read her book about 20 years ago. So an infant who is able to sense that the only way that they're going to be cared for by this narcissistic parent is to figure out how to make them happy or to not make them mad, the infant that can modify herself could cry less, could smile more, can be the pleasing child, the
Mm.
child that is perceived to the narcissist as a gift, engenders conditional love, conditional respect, and conditional caring. Because a narcissist, a pathological narcissist, cannot love, care, or respect anyone unless they are made to feel good about themselves. So the difference between the child who is going to become a codependent and the child who's going to become a pathological narcissist is on if they can accommodate their personality, mold their personality in a way that makes the narcissist feel better. So the child who cannot, say the child is colicky, say the child just is born with a personality, where they just say, no, you can't tell me what to do, which is that many people will say, including me, that's a normal, healthy child. The child that upsets the narcissist, that doesn't live up to the narcissist's fantasy, what I call their parenting fantasy, their narratives, it is deeply disappointing because the narcissist wanted and imagined and fantasized that this child that they made, that's coming from them, is going to make them feel better and solve their deeply embedded psychological problems. When that child disappoints them, that child, like any adult in their life, becomes a recipient of a narcissistic injury. So many people who are familiar with narcissists know that if you should disappoint, criticize, or disagree with a narcissist, they get very upset and they hurt you. So we call that a narcissistic injury. Well, that narcissistic injury is, and the threat of it is ever present in the child's world. The child who can be the cute little trophy child that can prove to the narcissist how good they are, that child gets the best of that parent and grows up with a different form of attachment trauma. And that form of attachment trauma is the pathway into codependency. The child that cannot figure out by virtue of his abilities, or maybe just the parent doesn't like the way they look, or has the wrong color eyes, or just isn't beautiful enough, whatever, that child is so far more psychologically damaged and traumatized. And that is the pathway for pathological narcissists, which explains why most pathological narcissists cannot access their childhood memories and do not know or have insight into their narcissism because their child.
Wait. So are you telling me that narcissists have trouble accessing childhood memories?
Yes. So let me finish this.
Okay, that blows my. No. I need to let that simmer here.
Okay. Well, I'm going to explain it.
That's blowing my mind for a lot of reasons that we'll get into. We'll get into that later. Why that's blowing my mind.
Okay. So the child who is on the developmental path to be pathological narcissist has to compartmentalize their trauma so they don't remember it, as it's a defense mechanism. It's a survival strategy. It's very similar to PTSD. So to your question is, the child who becomes codependent had attachment trauma that was far different and qualitatively less damaging than the child who became a narcissist.